Hey everybody, it's Jim, it's Matt, it's Wednesday. And if it's Wednesday, it must be the start of the NBA championship finals. New York and San Antonio. And I got to tell you, the buzz on the East Coast is pretty strong for the Knicks. It's funny, they got two baseball teams, two football teams, and yeah, true, there's the Nets, but really everybody in New York is absolutely geeked out about the possibility that for what is it, 53 years they might get a NBA championship.
Yeah. I mean, there's reason for them to be excited. Cited their success specifically in the last two playoff series that they had, sweeping the
Mhm.
Cavaliers, sweeping the Sixers as well. But again, when you look at the teams that were in the Eastern Conference that they specifically had to go through, and this is not disrespecting the 76ers, the Atlanta Hawks, the Cleveland Cavaliers, or anybody like that, they're this is two different this is a different league. Like they're playing a different game when you're playing
Uh-huh.
San Antonio compared to what you're playing against really those teams. And I love Donovan Mitchell. He's a
Mhm.
fantastic basketball player. He's not Victor Wembanyama. You know,
No.
76ers have a lot of really nice pieces. When Joel Embiid is healthy and he's
Mhm.
himself, he can be a game changer. Paul George used to be a game changer. But when you look around it, that none of them have a singular player that stands out like Victor Wembanyama, and none of them play complete team defense like the San Antonio Spurs are capable. Specifically with the alien that they have sitting at the center position, being the reigning defensive player of the year.
Yeah, and there's the other thing is that San Antonio, because they're so young, uh, they don't know any better. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes ignorance is bliss. And in basketball, and especially sports, you know, you just, you're playing with house money. You didn't expect to be there. And so you're like, oh, this is cool. Let's, and they get to open at home, which is another big deal. The Knicks have had 9 days off, which, depending upon how you look at it, is either a good thing or a bad thing. So, coming into tonight's game, I think that the Spurs are probably pretty happy with where they are, and the Knicks. It's funny to say because they're not really the favorite. The Knicks aren't, but I think the money line's almost even now. But I think the key here is I think the pressure's on the Knicks.
Yeah, listen, if the money's made it down to near even,
Hmm.
then that means that the line I see right now is 4.5 for San Antonio,
Okay.
plus 154 for New York, which is lower than I thought it would be. If
Hmm.
I'm being honest, I would wonder if there aren't some, obviously the size of town New York is, the fan base that it has. I'd be curious to see what the money coming in on New York looks like in order to get it there, because I would be really surprised if this thing opened at 4.5.
Hmm.
uh, Actually, it did open at 4.5. That's even more shocking. Look, I just don't see it. Like I just don't see the quality of basketball team that New York is. New York plays as a team, and again, you cannot discount what they did, but it
Hmm.
just does. There, it's a different game. Like you're playing in a different league. New York was 53-29, playing in the Eastern Conference primarily.
Cup recap. That was a mistake on the part of our technical crew here. Sorry, guys. All right, go ahead. We were talking about New York before you were so rudely interrupted.
Um, what was it? Just New York, they don't match up. Like they were 53-29 playing in the Eastern Conference. San Antonio 62-20 playing in the Western Conference. San Antonio has the harder conference. They have the better record. I don't think these teams are all that comparable. Look, De'Aaron
Mhm.
Fox, he's been kind of in and out of the lineup, bouncing around with an injury.
Right.
I don't think it matters if he's in the lineup. Look, he changes who Stephon Castle is in terms of his turnovers, but even at that measure, if you're getting the Stephon Castle who turns the ball over, I still don't know if it matters. I really don't. And
Mhm.
they could have me sit down here tomorrow and, maybe need to put a clown nose and an
Mhm.
outfit on, but it just doesn't. It seems like there's almost some sort of delirium because the New York Knicks are back in the finals that we think they're some great basketball team that is just magically going to spawn out of nowhere. They aren't. They've shown you who they are through a complete body of work of a season and a playoff run. They got hot and they played really well these last two
Mhm.
series. You absolutely cannot take that away from them. But they have had more than enough time to cool off between when their series with Cleveland ended and when San Antonio did. I talked about, could this series against Oklahoma City, could it wear a team down and have them almost
Mhm.
limping into the finals? That's not the juice that I get for San Antonio to go into Oklahoma City, win
Mhm.
Game 7 the way they did. They're hot. They've played more recently. They're playing at home. I would be surprised if New York covers this spread, to be quite frank, and I would be shocked if they win this series overall because I don't think they can sustain and match up with San Antonio across the 7-game series.
Well, sometimes you're betting money on teams and games like this is especially when you get a New York, a Boston, a team that has a a solid regional backing. Okay,
Yeah.
um, you get stupid money. Okay, it's what they call it in the betting industry. It's stupid money. It's people who are betting with their hearts and not with their heads. And you know, we've talked about this. You take a look at this San Antonio team. They're faster than New York. They're physical, and they're also incredibly better on defense than anybody that New York has played in the Eastern Conference. There's nobody in the Eastern Conference that plays defense as well as the as San Antonio does. And then you throw Wemby in the middle, and you know there's not they don't match up at all. This team.
No. No. It just doesn't. Again, I think a lot of the hype, I think a lot of the media has a lot to do with
Oh yeah, sure.
where we are in terms of this series and the way people view it, and that's fine, and that's good. But there are some times where I almost, and this is true for any sport, any matchup,
Hmm.
where sometimes I just find myself sitting back, and I've been wrong before in these times, but there are spots where I just sit back and I go like, what is everyone else seeing that I'm missing?
Right.
Because I'm missing something. I'm not seeing it. And again, I'd be happy to sit down and watch this game and be proved wrong, but
Hmm.
I'm hard pressed to have that happen.
I think one of the keys here to this, and what makes it interesting, is because there is a strong East Coast bias. Okay, say what you will, and I know that they'll deny, but ESPN is like having been there and having known a number of people there and worked there. Um, you either are a Boston or a New York fan.
Hmm.
Nobody else, none other team in the country exists other than the Red Sox, the Yankees, the New England Patriots, the Giants, and the Jets, and that whole situation. They're unapologetically in the tank for one side or the other, depending on which end of New England you came from to get to Bristol, Connecticut. So it's difficult. Then, in fairness, and look, he'll be the first to call himself out on it. Mike Green, who I love and who's been a long time friend. Mike did the Knicks for a number of years.
Still
Um,
does.
yeah, still does, but I'm just saying he's not. He was their primary voice, back in the day, and and still does some games. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be one way or the other because that's not. Mike's a pro; he can do this without rooting for him. But there's just so many Knicks fans that are buying into this, and because San Antonio is a smaller market, um, from that standpoint, yeah, they know who Wemby is, but there's beyond that. They just go taking a look at this through New York glasses, saying, oh boy, this is going to be our chance. As a matter of fact, during I wrote a story on this yesterday. And it's up during a media call this week. Mike mentioned that for him, he can play it down the middle, and he will. So for professionalism, I don't worry about that. But he said it's kind of like, he likened it to the Cubs and the Red Sox waiting so long to get a world championship. I'm not so certain that that is the case, but yeah, I mean, look, they haven't. It's been 2000 since a New York team has won a national championship in anything. So
yeah, I mean, you have to go back to what is it? Was it the Yankees in
yeah.
08?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time for the city of New York, but at the same time, I'm not sure there's going to be a person outside of that city in America that you're going to find that's going to feel sorry for the city of New York and its lack of championship.
I'm not saying that. Just yeah, and I would be one of them. I think I just think that the smart money is on San Antonio, because they've got a much better, younger, faster. I mean, there's really no other metric by which you can measure that that the Knicks are better than San Antonio.
Yeah, and look, I love Jalen Brunson, and what he's done in New York, really after Dallas turned their back on him, going into that free agency back in what was it, 2018, I think.
Yeah,
and what he's done for the New York Knicks, he's pretty much solely responsible for getting them to this place that they're currently in. When you compare him to SGA, that's a different matchup. Like that's a world's different matchup that you have to deal with. And with all due respect to Jalen Brunson, I'm sure Stephon Castle is probably going to take a deep breath going into tonight's game, knowing that, hey, the guy standing across from me tonight is not 6'5". And yes, he tried to sell some fouls, but it's worlds different than that guy that we just played in the last series. Right. He's still got to be up for the task. But the type of defender that Stephon Castle is not going to. I don't think it's going to bother him. I think he has the capabilities to stop Jalen Brunson for an entirety of a series, to be quite honest. And they're going to force New York to beat them outside of Jalen Brunson. And I'm curious to see if OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns, Josh Hart, these pieces that they have around him are able to kind of carry the load, because that's where the attention is going to be. I think the problem for New York lies in the fact that San Antonio's two best defensive players match up with your two best offensive players, and your two best offensive players aren't exactly plus defenders on the other side of the floor all the time. And Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson matching up with Stephon Castle and Victor Wembanyama. I just don't like it. It's not computing, I guess is the best way to put it. And I know I've said it, 8 times already, but again, you look at these matchups, and I view New York as a much larger underdog than they are currently being given by the odds makers, by the books, by the media, everybody else. But it's just, how does it happen? And in my mind, I don't see the path. I don't see the matchup where they're that much better. Maybe at forward with OG Anunoby, that's somewhere where they can win. But throughout the course of an entire 7-game series, I just don't know where their advantages will lie in its entirety.
It's one of those things where you've got to look at it and go, okay, I do get it, but I get the theory of the case that New York is, feels they're strong, but your point there of taking Brunson out of the game, or at least limiting him. New York, there's no way in this world New York wins this championship if Brunson isn't putting up an MVP type of, and what I'm talking about, a finals MVP type performance to get it done. And he's not that. I mean, he's great, but he's not that great.
Now, in fairness, what I will say is I don't think to this level necessarily, but
Mhm.
I did hold a similar thought process going into last year's finals with Indiana and Oklahoma City. It was very confusing, or I was struggling to see how, Indiana would be able to get it done. And you can make the argument, especially based on the way that some of Oklahoma City's top players played in that game 7 last year, that if Tyrese Halliburton doesn't tear his Achilles, that maybe they're the ones that held the Larry O'Brien after game 7 in Oklahoma City last year. I didn't see that one, but they found a way. Sometimes there is something, sometimes it's not necessarily about the talent on the roster. It's a little bit more about the belief in your team chemistry, and that can carry you a long way. I mean, just ask the 2013 Boston Red Sox, a team that was not supposed to win anything, right? Like there are those teams where you look at it and go kind of like, where the hell did they come from? Or
Mhm.
how did this happen? And look at the teams they beat. I mean, go back to Dirk Nowitzki in Dallas, and you look at the run that he went on,
Mhm.
beating beating Oklahoma City when they had James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, and then
Right.
he beats that, Miami Heat team with LeBron, Bosh, and Wade. Like that
Right.
that wasn't supposed to happen. Where was the way for that one? If I was sitting in the same spot, if I had the same knowledge that I had now, I would have thought the same thing going into that series as well. But sometimes it doesn't matter. That's what I will say on the counterpoint to what I've been saying.
Well, see, I'm looking. You got OG and you got Towns. If they're going to win, if New York's going to win, one of those two guys is going to have to be the MVP.
Yeah, and I think a lot of weight is kind of going to fall on Carl Anthony Towns. And look, he can work the perimeter, and he's a very good shooter from the 5 position for him.
Mhm.
He's got to get Victor Wembanyama into foul trouble. That they have to be able to get him off the floor because I don't think it's a situation where you can outlast it or you win with him on the floor for 90% of the time that they're playing. Like that's just
Mhm.
not I don't see how that situation adds up for them.
Mhm.
But if Karl Anthony Towns can get him into some foul trouble, maybe limit his minutes in the first half or second half, back end, keep him out for that middle portion, really in the fourth quarter where
Mhm.
they want to hold him out because he's in foul trouble. That's a scenario that can work out in New York's favor. They've got to find a way to get him in some foul trouble, though.
Yeah. Um, that's what you know. That's what they did with OKC. They annoyed him. They even got him thrown out of the game for the blatant. Um, so can it be done? Yes. Can they annoy him enough to get him pissed off to the point where he makes a mistake? Yeah, yeah, they could. But I'm not sure that's a sound way of playing basketball by saying my whole concept of beating, you know, uh, San Antonio is to try to, drive Wemby crazy. Um, because I believe, this is, we talked about this before. San Antonio is a Popovich type team. You don't, you may get them mad for a little while, but they refocus themselves pretty quick. And what Mike Brown's done in New York, good on him. He's done a really good job of coaching. But um, again, you just can't you can't account for the youth, the speed, and the physicality and defense that San Antonio is going to throw at the Knicks.
Yeah, and I think to a certain respect, I think that New York probably has the coaching advantage in terms of having Mike Brown and what he's done. You look at some of the
Sure.
places that he's been. Like, yeah, I think people forget that when he was in Sacramento, something that eventually didn't work out. When he had some talent there, they won. Like they won in a way that Sacramento doesn't typically win.
Hmm.
Um, but now that he's in New York, you can see him kind of working his magic early again. In terms of San Antonio and how they bounce back, I think you can see that going back in Oklahoma City. You look at that game 5 and the way that I think the image of Victor Wembanyama, he talked to Plumlee, talked to Biombo. They go out there, they have some hard fouls. I think it was shown that they were a little bit flustered. And then they came back and they won game 6. and then they went on the road and they won Game 7 convincingly in Oklahoma City. So they're able to, they do have the ability to get flustered and reset, but that's a little bit more on a game by game basis. You've got to be able to find a way to continue to get under his skin game in and game out, because it is going to be a situation where it may work for a game, but that game is not going to carry over into the next, typically speaking, for this Spurs team.
No, it's just not gonna. And it's just, I guess the bottom line here is the Knicks. If you don't usually win championships on intangibles, and the intangible here would be the crowd. And look, I can't imagine that there isn't been a place that the Spurs have played that's going to be any more intimidating than Madison Square Garden with a full house of lunatics. But I don't think that's going to phase them.
Yeah, look, and again, I understand what the Garden is, and the Garden itself is a cathedral. But in terms of like the rowdiness of a fan base, New York's rowdiest fans are going to be on the streets doing interviews while the game's going on.
Right.
They're not gonna be in the building, because there's a certain barrier of entry financially here to these games in MSG that probably are going to limit a little bit of the raunchiness and rowdiness of the crowd. I don't think such was the case in Oklahoma City. Like in Oklahoma as a state, that is a college sports state. And so you get that kind of vibe and that kind of energy and that kind of atmosphere, the loudness and all the noise that goes along with it. So I think in terms of, if you want to play up where they're playing, I think the Garden could definitely play in their minds. But in terms of the crowd themselves, I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to best Oklahoma City.
I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a pretty amazing situation tonight. So it'll be fun to watch, and we'll be checking it and seeing how it goes. Last night in Carolina, we thought, well, what if Carolina, they've been off for a while and they're playing a really gutsy Vegas team. What happens if Vegas, waltzes in there and starts, to get up on them, because again, they hadn't played in a while. The opposite happened. Carolina got up 2-0 early in the game. Vegas fought back, and Vegas ended up winning the game. And it looked a lot more like a first round game where both teams had just come off a 7-game series than a one team coming off a 7-game series and one team coming off of a layoff. So to me, what I was impressed with is that Vegas went in there and beat them on their own ice when they played as good a hockey as they played all season.
Yeah, at this point, you have to assume that Vegas is going to win this Stanley Cup final, because the way that Carolina's been playing and the way you open up that game, like, momentum has flown purely in Carolina's way. Like, they've known nothing but success so far through the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then it almost like it just hit a wall, right? And that's something that matters. Taking game one and really reclaiming home ice advantage for the remainder of this series, if they were to defend it, like that is big for Vegas, and it's something where I think in a lot of ways maybe people thought that eventually Vegas would lose. Like, this isn't supposed to keep happening. They weren't favored coming into it necessarily, but they just keep winning, and at a certain point, the success has been proved out. Like, I think it'd be the same way as if New York goes into San Antonio tonight and wins game one. At a certain point, you just got to be like, you got to tip your cap and just be like, okay, this might just be their year.
And you just sit back and say, okay, let's take it and go with it and see how it plays out. So there you go. All right, we'll get to baseball in a couple of minutes, but first, I wanted to chat with you. You've been doing a lot of outstanding coverage of golf. Um, how does the college game factor into? I mean, we all know, in football, there's the draft situation is such, and we know in baseball and in the NBA we just talked about, and hockey as well. There's no you can't draft in college golf,
Mhm.
but are the kids coming out of golf of college golf these days translating into pros as they did early in the early '70s and '80s?
Uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, the guy that's coming out of Auburn, he's going to play today. The champion starts at 6 p.m. Um, and they're playing UCLA. But this guy on Auburn is special. Jackson Coyburn is something that has the potential. He's already done with the PGA Tour U. He's going to the PGA Tour once his time is done at Auburn. He did lose the individual championship to Preston Stout, who plays at Oklahoma State. He then went on to get his revenge in the team championship, beating him one up in match play. But the guys that are in college golf and the guys that rise to the top, they have there's two developmental paths. You can choose to go professional instead of going pro or instead of going to college, which is what a guy like a Blades Brown that you're currently seeing. He's shown up on some PGA Tour events. He's made it. He's currently got a temporary exemption on the PGA Tour right now. He chose to go the professional route. The most popular example of it right now is Akshay Patia. He was a guy who was highly recruited, considered going to play college golf, ultimately chose to go the professional route, and it's worked out for him now. But a lot of these guys, they're translating when they're the number one golfer and they're making it to the PGA Tour. They've been translating. Luke Clanton's had a tough year. This is his first full year on the PGA Tour. He hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype. But a guy like Michael Bjornsson, I stumble over that name every time, was the guy at
No others. Don't worry. You're in good company on that one.
but he was the guy who was on the PGA Tour U. He was the guy that won out, went straight to the PGA Tour. He's proved it out. He's in the top 60 of the OWGR right now. He's played really well. Hasn't necessarily made it to all the major championships. He missed Augusta this year, but he's been playing some really good golf at the tournaments that he's been going to. And I would expect nothing less from Jackson Coyburn. I would expect to see him. Honestly, I think generously speaking, there's a chance that he wins a PGA Tour event in his first season on tour.
That's phenomenal. I mean, that's good stuff. I mean, we know Freddie Couples went to Houston. We know a lot of these kids. Tiger Woods, was 3 years at Stanford. Nota Begay was 3 years at Stanford. We know that college golf has been a good stepping stone for a number of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, Scotty and Jordan went to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
The University of Georgia, I know, has put out a big crop. By the way, their head golf coach is retiring after this year. Guy who coached Russell Henley, Sepp Straka, Brian Harmon, Kevin Kisner. Those are just the guys off the top of my head. There's more that are still out there on the tour. But yeah, college golf in itself. Stanford, another fantastic program in terms of pumping them out. Obviously, Tiger's going to be your prime example of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, college golf as a whole is really, I think, the most true, like most well tested and proved out formula for making it to the PGA Tour is to go play college golf. Um, and it's a different style of golf. They play a different, it's the golf that these guys are playing in college is worlds different from the golf that they will play on the PGA Tour, on the Corn Ferry Tour,
Mm-hmm.
any level of amateur, like semi pro golf that they're going to play. But it's still a necessary learning experience, and I think it ultimately probably provides these guys a better sense of stability and typically allows them to develop in a little bit more of a comfortable environment instead of going pro and just having to grind it out to make it yourself. It feels like you've got a little bit more of a support system.
Yep. Um, the the other thing is that I know a number of these young guys who play golf, and women as well, who play golf on the tour, uh, have gone from college and gone overseas and played, and kind of did well over there and worked their way back. Is that something that you think is going to be a trend?
I don't know. The DP World Tour is a really fantastic option
Hmm.
to like. It's a good secondary to the PGA Tour. Like,
Hmm.
and it's been something that's been talked about a little bit more in regards to Live Golf and like their partnership or lack thereof with the PGA or with the DP World Tour. The PGA Tour has a partnership with the DP World Tour where they, some guys receive exemptions, some guys, like to both tours and they're supposed to work together. But look, the push comes to shove. DP World Tour is a little bit of like a developmental, almost in a way, tour for people that are across the pond. Like,
Hmm.
goal is to make it to the PGA Tour still. Alex Fitzpatrick proved that. Christopher Rayton is a guy who was playing on the PGA Tour last year, won at Quail Hollow this year for the Truist.
Hmm.
This is the end goal for these guys is to make it to the PGA Tour, and so that's an option. But everybody knows like the end goal is still pushing you towards the PGA Tour, and it's just not something that I think. Again, you do it the way that you feel comfortable with. Like each one of these guys is an individual sport, so it's an individual decision that you have to make. But in such an individual sport, college provides a little bit more of a support system and team atmosphere as
Hmm.
compared to going overseas. Because when you choose the professional route, whether it be in the United States, whether it be overseas, it is something where you are betting on yourself and you have to go do it effectively alone. I mean, you'll have a team to an extent and you'll have your family, but this is on you and it is up to you to succeed. Not that that's not true in college golf, but again, you have classes, you have structure, you have all this stuff. You you're kind of just out there on your own in terms of going the pro route.
Yeah, and I think that that's uh, a lot of it has to do with the fact that you get to play on some of these courses, you get to learn them, and it's a whole new set of competition. And it's tough to play 4 rounds of golf and play at the level it's going to take to win.
Yeah, yeah, because look, the travel and stuff like that grinds on you, and when you add outside
Mhm.
pressures, like it's hard enough to go play really good golf, like if you just roll out of bed sometimes for these tournaments. But when you add the outside pressures that come with being, a professional kind of out there on your own, is it adds a little bit extra, and I think the biggest thing or the thing that makes college golf a bit more enticing now is the PGA Tour U program. Like the fact that these guys can get in this and they have a direct path. Like you can earn your way straight on to the PGA Tour if you play well enough in college. You can earn your way straight onto the Corn Ferry Tour if you play well enough in college. Now, granted, there's pretty high levels to it. Like you gotta reach a certain peak in terms of the golf that you're playing in college to do that. But it provides you a more concrete path forward.
Right. And that's you know something they truly, truly have always wanted to have, as a feeder situation,
Mhm.
from that standpoint. So there you go on that. All right, let's jump over for a quick look at Major League Baseball. And a lot of crazies going on in Major League Baseball these days. Um, it's teams that should be winning aren't, and teams are winning, or they're going. How did that happen? How did we get to this point? Um, we've got a scoreboard this afternoon that has some games starting early. Um, Marlins Nationals is going to start in about 15, about half an hour. Rays and Tigers is going to start a little after the top of the hour. Uh, 1:40 the White Sox at the Twins, the Mets. Mariners. I'm sorry, that game's at 3:40. Padres have an not an evening game for them in Philly against the Phillies. It's Padres and Phillies. So Orioles, Red Sox. We're not going to talk about that last night. Guardians, Yankees, Royals, Reds, and who else is playing today? Jays, Braves, Giants, Brewers, Rangers, Cardinals, Athletics, Cubs, Pirates back at Houston. They came back and won that game last night. Rockies, Angels, and Dodgers, Diamondbacks. Yeah, it's been interesting. One of the things that we've been seeing over the past few days is teams that have been, doing pretty well have kind of hit the skids here for a couple of games, and you wonder, okay, what are we gonna see on the other side, right? And I think one of the things that might be fun to watch is basically, all right. So these teams that have played really really well and now are having a little bit of adversity, are they going to be able to come out on the other side? And I think that's where a lot of people are going to be paying attention in the coming weeks.
I think in particular the one that you gives you a little bit cause for concern. I would say not necessarily in terms of where they're going to end up in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like making the playoffs because I don't think that's necessarily in jeopardy with the start to the season that they had.
Mm-hmm.
In Tampa Bay, there's got to be some concern about, you look at the underlying metrics and they said that they were pretty much outperforming what the metrics said.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be a regression to the mean? It is something that I would watch in terms of that baseball team because look, it does when you make it to Memorial Day, that's supposed to be the measuring stick of we know who we are,
Mm-hmm.
but the season still has its ebbs and flows,
Sure.
and it you know if you get cold, are you able to bounce back? Because sometimes if you've been outperforming your metrics and then you go cold, are you able to get back to that version of baseball that you were playing at the start of the year? I think that's an interesting case study, and if a team gets hot, are they able to stay hot? Like, are they able to
Mm-hmm.
carry over, like a winning streak? Are they able to continue that through? But when push comes to shove, like, whether you put together a good run and you make it to the postseason, if you've got cracks, they're going to show in September. They just flat out are. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to make it very deep in the playoffs if you've been able to just kind of hide some holes in your roster along throughout the regular season, which, there is a certain credit that's due if you've been able to hide those holes in your roster throughout the entirety of the regular season to make it up until that point.
Yeah, I know that talking about the Rays situation, for them, they had two guys that they've counted on in starting pitching that got blasted, um, and they've had a little bit of a bullpen issues. So, I think that uh, the opportunity, the teams playing, um, they're not beating themselves. Basically when the Tigers hit 5 home runs in a game, it's very difficult to think that you're going to come back and win that game. Just isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that from that standpoint, uh, we're going to have to see if Steven Matz he just hasn't done it. Um,
Mhm.
he early in the season wasn't bad, but as the season has progressed, um, you know that's been a problem. One of the
Which
things that go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was perplexed with their game plan with Steven Matz, stretching him
Mhm.
out into a starter. He was a really good bullpen arm last year,
Right.
and you would probably know better than I. Is that something they did out of necessity, or is that something they did just because they thought it was going to work?
No, they didn't have necessity.
I kind of figured that was going to be the case, but
Yeah, they really didn't know what to expect because they'd had a couple of guys who had had some serious arm issues.
McClanahan being one.
Yeah, McClanahan being the main concern. So they figured, all right, well, let's they're playing with house money. Let's see what happens with Steven Matz. And and he probably will go back to the bullpen. From what I understand, they've got 2 or 3 kids that they like in the minors, and they feel, they could have brought him up earlier, but they decided they didn't need him, and so now maybe they need him. So we're going to be seeing some kids coming up from their AAA team that they've been very high on. So we'll see how that goes from that standpoint. Excuse me. So, yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting situation going forward. Um, Again, watching that entire Central Division of the National League is going to be interesting to see. It's kind of like watching a NASCAR race, right? You're like, all right, is it good to be in top right now, or do you want to draft your way into to that final part of the season? So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say in baseball news, I thought it was telling. Last night the Red Sox dropped their 20th game at Fenway Park. They're now 9-20 at home this
Oof.
season. Not only is it a major league worst, it is a like like far and away the major league worst record at home. And you look at this baseball team, and they look like a completely different baseball team at home versus on the road. And that's from, I mean, mainly it's the approach at the plate. Like their approach at the plate on the road looks significantly different than their approach at the plate at home. And you wonder, like, is there some mental stuff, this, that, and the other? I thought it was very telling last night after the game that Isaiah Falefa, a guy who is there on a 1-year deal, but he's a veteran. He's been there and he's done it before. Talked about outside distractions when they were at home. And that is something that is like, I feel like it's so far beyond the realm of understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're in this scenario and you're in this pressure cooker, because I mean, good God, when you're not playing well in Boston, Fenway can be a pressure cooker sometimes. Like with the tourist trap that it is, sometimes it's not. Like you can get fans from outside, you can get a little more casual fans, but it should be a pressure cooker and they should feel the pressure. And if these guys are going out and they're having a good time in Boston, I don't get it. Like, what's not computing here for this baseball team? And some of these guys that are supposed to be, I think, honestly, leaders in this clubhouse that are allowing themselves to focus on things outside of the game, really, when you're at home. Like this is your job. You're getting paid millions of dollars. You don't have to go out for dinner and drinks every damn night when you're at home.
Mm-hmm.
Just play the game, go home, do your damn homework, show up at the ballpark, and do your job. I don't feel like it's this hard, but it feels like they're making it this hard. And I think it's telling that a guy who's not been here for this long, and really with everything considered, has been one of your better players over the past 2 weeks, and Isaiah Falefa has to come out and say this. Like this, I'm not sure if this should necessarily be his spot, considering he's been here for a year. But the fact that he's coming out and say it means that it's probably a bigger problem that's permeated throughout this locker room, and somebody had to say it, and he felt like nobody else was going to, so he did.
Yep. And at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want somebody who's going to be a leader and do that.
So, I mean, and this goes back, I wonder now, like you look at the firing of Alex Cora and the way things were supposed to change. It was the manager's fault, and this, that, and the other. And look, some of it can be on roster construction. I know that there are some guys out there that have put in the work and have gotten better. Caleb Durbin has played much better baseball across the last 2 weeks. So has Isaiah Falefa. There are guys on this roster that you can point to that have improved, but there are guys on this team that have not, and they continue to be average, and their approach at home in particular has been unacceptable at the plate. Like these are not like – it's not – it's you see a different approach. They're getting out like 7-pitch innings and stuff like this. They're not doing their job when runners are in scoring position. They're not moving runners over. They don't carry the same approach to their offense, and they have a major league worst offense when they are playing at Fenway Park compared to when they are playing on the road, when they were hitting like they're averaging over 4 runs a game on the road. They're averaging under 3 runs a game at home. I think they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.2 runs a game at home.
Mhm.
It's not been an acceptable approach at home. And with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa coming out and saying that, it gives you a clear and obvious reason why. Because there are guys that you can point to and say, well, this roster has the talent to compete. And you see these guys go out on the road and they are able to score runs on a consistent night in, night out basis. And they put together consistent at bats. And it's not something that shows up at home. And everybody was looking for why. Well, now you have your why. How do you fix it? And I'm not sure there's necessarily a quick fix for this thing in Boston.
There's not. And part of what you're talking about and what would concern me about the Red Sox is I don't see them, you know, we talked about the Rays, we talked about the Washington Nationals, we talked about, teams that are overachieving, right? One of the things that you see if you go there early, right? If you sneak into the ballpark at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll see them doing infield practice 3 times a week. You'll see pitchers practicing fielding 2 times a week. You'll see outfielders, working on tracking balls. You'll see literally everything that you would see in spring training on a 5-day-a-week basis. And you would think, well, gosh, by this time they're professional baseball players. They know how to do this. They do, but it's important to know that if you don't have the talent that other teams do, you have to play tough, and you cannot make mistakes. And the bunting and all the other little fundamentals that go into this, in many ways, are why the Rays are where the Rays are, um, why the Nationals have moved forward, to where they're at least competitive, and other teams do it. I have not seen any indication that the Red Sox spent much time at all working on fundamental baseball.
I'm not even they've been one of the better fielding teams in baseball, which has
Uh-huh.
been a large shift from the years prior, which I think has been so frustrating to watch because in the past it's been, they can't field, they're not great pitching. Well, now they can field, now they can pitch, but good God, don't ask them to hit it home. Like it's just it's confusing, it's concerning, and
Mhm.
you wonder with the outside distractions. And let's just say that that is like the sole purpose in this entire thing is how do you fix that? Can you fix that? It's yeah, this is you have a coach and you have a GM and all this other stuff, but at the end of the day, these are grown ass adults, and you can't control what they do on off the field. Like you don't control what they do
Right.
when they go home. That's their own choice. And at a certain point, you got to start making decisions and wondering, like, hey, if these guys aren't doing what they're supposed to do off the field, then why am I employing them? Like, at a certain point, like, yes, you're a baseball player, and yes, you get all the fun and good, but this is still your damn job. Go
Mhm.
home and do your job. Like, there's a certain aspect of, and I think this is some of the concern when Alex Bregman walked out the door this offseason is there was a professionalism that went about Alex Bregman and the way that he approached the game of baseball and the way that he approached hitting, right? And he had these young guys under his wing. And that was important for the success of that team last year. And that was something that you're concerned about losing when he walked out the door. And I think some of that professionalism and that leadership that he had throughout that clubhouse, you see it missing now in some of the stuff that has started to leak about this baseball team.
Yep. And that usually doesn't get better
Yeah,
until later in the in the world.
yeah,
So um, I don't know. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a very, very interesting way that you know. I'd be looking, if I was a Red Sox fan, at what's going to happen next season more than what's going to happen this season.
yeah. But if the guys that you're relying on going into next season are the problem this season, then what's going to change?
Hopefully, a general manager.
Well, yeah, but he's not in the clubhouse on a day in day out basis necessarily.
No, it's true, but somebody's got to come in. Let's say, for instance, all right, do you go out and get a manager? I mean, you can't fire 26 guys. So,
No.
what do you do? Do you get a manager? I mean, there's got to be some sort of, you know, there's no magic pill to this, but there are, and I've seen it, and we talked about it earlier when, um, when the Phillies needed a turnaround, they blew things up in their managing situation and put Don Mattingly over there,
Mm-hmm.
who was their bench coach. I don't know if there's anybody, you would know this better than I, in the Red Sox organization who could step in and say, okay, I'm gonna, there's a new sheriff in town, and let's see, let's sit some of these guys down for a couple of games, or send some guys down for some games to just to prove that what, there's nobody on this team is safe because you're damn not playing up to your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm just I'm spitballing here. I have no idea.
Yeah. I don't know. I think maybe, and I wonder if it applies to some of the younger guys on the team, maybe the younger position players. I'm curious about, but you wonder if there's at a certain point you need to start having some internal pressure. And one guy that just has not flat out lived up to the expectations. He's as good a defender as you could possibly ask for, but good God, don't ask him to swing the bat at home. And that's Marcelo Meyer. He needs some internal pressure. Franklin Arias might provide that. He's been raking in Double A, and he's the kind of prospect that can push you and potentially force, give you some positional pressure and some job pressure. A reminder that your job's not safe. A reminder that this is a job. And so I don't know. There's no quick fix. There's no easy fix. It just sucks watching the Red Sox at Fenway Park is like a top 5 worst experience of my life this year. And they go out and they're fantastic on the road, and that's fun and that's cool. I just like for one of these times when they go out and they have a successful road trip to come home and do the same shit they did on the road because they're capable of it. They just like lose it. They just lose sight completely.
They're just not doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
No.
the exact quote from
We'll
Isaiah kind
see, right?
of was I just feel like at home we see a lot of people that I just don't know around this area. Talking about like outside people kind of being in and around
Mhm.
the Red Sox in their clubhouse when they're at home.
Well, it is amazing, that's for sure. And unfortunately, too, not in a good way, would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's it for today, folks. Hope you had a good time. And one quick final thought. I forgot to get this from you yesterday. Now, I know you've got an affinity for Matthew Stafford, who's a fantastic player. Miles Garrett to the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
Got to be a man. That's a eye popper.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's almost now a pressure, and I would assume that there is going to be a corresponding move coming at some point. I don't know when it's
Mm-hmm.
going to come. That is going to make this team that much better in Aaron Donald, and when I would say when he decides to put the pads back on, not if.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of feeling that you have about it. But there is a pressure where you kind of have to go win a Super Bowl now. If you're Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay, really everybody on that Rams team, is there is an added expectation and a ramped up pressure when you are believed to be the favorites, when you are the team. You are getting like, look, they're not going into the season as the Super Bowl champions, but they don't have to be, right? Like they
Right.
have the pressure and the expectation that they should go win the Super Bowl next year. Like those are the expectations. You look at the moves they made. Their secondary was a problem last year. You go get Trent McDuffie. You go get Jalen Watson from Kansas City. You literally just picked the 2 top corners off of a team that's been in the Super Bowl for, what was it? It was 3 years in a row with
Yeah.
that streak ending last year. You plucked the top 2 and you plugged them in. That fixes your corner problem. Now you went and got Myles Garrett, a problem that you didn't really have on that defensive line with Jared Verse. But guess what? this guy's different than Jared Verse. I mean, worlds different than Jared Verse. And now if you go add Aaron Donald to that defensive line with Braden Fisk, with Byron Young, now you've got the corners figured out. The offense is going to be the same. You know what you're getting over there. You still got Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Kyron Williams, all those tight ends that they just pretty much rotate and they fill in as they're needed. Look, it's going to take a big injury at a big position in order to derail this Rams team. But at what are they at? They're at like plus 600 right now. That feels like value for a Super Bowl pick at this point.
And that, my friends, is what you need to know. All right. Have a lovely day, guys, and we'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be able to talk a little bit about what happened with regard to tonight's game between the Knicks and the Spurs, and a little bit of a preview of upcoming golf this week at the Memorial, and, of course, baseball and some other fun stuff. So plenty to talk about tomorrow. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for being with us.